What happens when the mountain decides to test more than your strength? High above civilization, where storms strike without warning and silence feels heavier than the wind, one man steps onto Ridge 47. He believes he's prepared. He has the training, the gear, the experience, but the mountain isn't there to test his skill, it's there to test his will. This isn't just a story about freezing winds or vanishing trails. It's about a decision, a single moment, a choice that separates survival from sacrifice. Because sometimes the real battle isn't against nature, it's against the voice inside you, the one that whispers, "Save yourself." Tonight on the Dark Ascent Stories, we bring you a survival journey where one storm changed everything, and one choice determined who would make it off the mountain. If you're drawn to intense survival stories, emotional turning points, and journeys that stay with you long after the screen fades to black, you've found your place. Subscribe now, because every ascent demands something in return. And not everyone who climbs comes back down. It started with a silence so sudden it felt unnatural. Daniel Mercer noticed it before he saw the clouds. The wind had dropped. The birds were gone. Even the crunch of his boots against the frozen trail seemed muted. High on Ridge 47, silence was never a good sign. He checked the horizon. A dark mass was rolling in fast, swallowing the pale winter sky. Tut. Weather report had mentioned possible instability, but forecasts meant little in these mountains. Here, nature rewrote its rules without warning. Within minutes, snow began to fall, light at first, almost harmless. Daniel adjusted his pack straps and continued forward. He had trained for winter trekking, he had prepared for isolation, but he had not prepared for the sky to vanish. The snowfall thickened violently, driven sideways by a rising wind. The trail disappeared beneath a growing white sheet. Landmarks blurred. The ridge to his right faded into nothing. Stay steady, he told himself. Panic would burn calories. Calories meant heat. Heat meant survival. He spotted a formation of large rocks about 50 meters ahead, natural cover against the wind. Each step toward them felt like walking through water. Twice he stumbled. The second time, he slid dangerously close to the ridge edge before jamming his ice axe into the snow. His breathing turned sharp. Reaching the rocks felt like victory, but the storm was only beginning. As he dropped his pack and started pitching his tent behind the boulders, one thought pressed heavily against his mind. If this storm lasted more than a day, he might not be walking off this mountain. And the worst was still coming. The storm didn't howl. It hunted. Inside his low-set thermal tent, Daniel could hear the wind circling him like something alive. Tee-hee fabric snapped violently with each gust. Snow piled quickly against the sides, pressing inward. He worked methodically. Melt snow, ration food, preserve fuel. His radio returned nothing but static. GPS signal lost. Isolation became real. He layered dry clothing and sealed himself inside his sleeping bag, placing a heated bottle near his chest. Hypothermia wouldn't announce itself loudly. It would arrive quietly, disguised as exhaustion. Hours passed in darkness. Then the mountain cracked. A deep, thunderous rumble tore through the storm. The ground trembled beneath him. Avalanche. Daniel froze. The sound rolled across the ridge like distant artillery. Snow shifted somewhere beyond his shelter. He held his breath, waiting for impact, but none came. Eventually, the rumbling faded. He didn't sleep after that. When morning arrived, it came with eerie calm. The storm had stopped completely. No wind, no falling snow. He unzipped the tent cautiously. The landscape was unrecognizable. Smooth waves of fresh snow buried the original trail. The ravine nearby had disappeared beneath thick drifts. Had he slipped the night before, there would have been no stopping. He checked supplies, 4 days of food if rationed, 2 days of fuel, batteries at 70%. But the real problem stood before him. The avalanche had sealed off his return path. Going back was no longer an option. He studied his compass and map. A northeast ridge might lead to a lower saddle, 6 kilometers away, where rescue patrols occasionally flew. It was risky, but staying meant slow death once fuel ran out. Daniel packed carefully, and as he stepped away from his shelter, one thought followed him. He was now moving deeper into the unknown, and the mountain was not done testing him. Every step forward felt like a gamble. The snow reached Daniel's thighs in places, swallowing his legs with each movement. Progress was painfully slow. He created a rhythm. 50 steps, pause, breathe. 50 steps, pause, breathe. The sky remained gray and heavy. Dehydration crept in unnoticed. His water bottle had begun freezing despite insulation. He forced himself to drink small amounts regularly. Weakness here meant collapse. By midday, fatigue weighed on him like an extra pack. His calves burned, his shoulders ached. Then he saw something that stopped him cold. A single ski pole, half buried in snow. Daniel stared at it. He wasn't supposed to see anyone up here. He scanned the area. No footprints, no movement, just endless white. Had someone else been caught in the storm? He called out, his voice swallowed by the open ridge. No response. Logic told him not to waste energy searching. Survival meant focus. But leaving the pole behind felt wrong. He marked the location mentally and pressed on, though unease now followed him. The ridge steepened toward the saddle. Wind picked up again, not violent, but sharp. Late afternoon light began fading earlier than expected. Clouds thickened. He was close. He had to be. Then, faintly through the cold air, he heard something. A low sound. Not wind, not shifting snow. It sounded like coughing. Daniel turned slowly toward a shallow depression between snowdrifts. His heart began to pound, because if someone else was alive out here, then he wasn't alone on this mountain after all, and saving himself might no longer be the only mission. He could keep walking, or he could turn back. Daniel moved toward the sound, each step heavier than the last. In the shallow hollow between drifts, he saw a shape partially buried, a man barely conscious. The stranger's face was pale, lips cracked, movements weak. His backpack lay torn beside him. "Hey, stay with me," Daniel shouted, kneeling beside him. The man whispered something unintelligible. Daniel checked quickly. Pulse weak, but present. Severe exhaustion, early hypothermia. The logical choice would have been brutal. Keep moving and save himself. Instead, Daniel pulled off his spare thermal layer and wrapped it around the stranger. He shared water, forcing small sips between the man's trembling lips. Moving alone had been hard. Moving with someone nearly unconscious would be nearly impossible. But leaving him was not an option. Using rope, Daniel secured the man's pack to his own and helped him to his feet. Step by step, they moved toward the saddle. Progress slowed to a crawl. Light faded quickly. Then, in the distance, a faint chopping rhythm echoed through the air. Daniel froze. Helicopter blades. He grabbed his flare gun with shaking hands. He only had one flare left. And now it had to be enough for both of them, because if he missed this chance, neither of them would survive the night. This was their only shot. The helicopter sound drifted across the valley, distant but unmistakable. It wasn't headed directly toward them. It was sweeping wide patrol lines. Daniel positioned himself on the highest visible point of the saddle. He steadied his breathing despite exhaustion clawing at him. He fired. The flare exploded into the sky in a streak of burning red against gray clouds. For a long moment, nothing happened. The helicopter continued forward. Daniel's chest tightened. Then it slowed. It tilted. It turned. Relief nearly buckled his knees. The rescue helicopter banked sharply and began circling above them. Snow whipped violently as it descended lower. A rescue technician dropped down carefully. "You two picked a bad place to camp," the rescuer shouted over the rotors. Daniel managed a faint smile. Wasn't exactly planned. The team worked efficiently, securing the unconscious man first. Daniel insisted. "I'm fine," he said. "Take him." The rescuer gave him a long look but nodded. Minutes later, both were lifted into the aircraft. As the helicopter rose above Ridge 47, Daniel looked down at the endless white expanse that had nearly claimed them. He had come prepared to survive alone, but he was leaving because he chose not to. Still, one question lingered in his mind. Who was the other man, and how had he ended up there? The answer would surprise him even more than the storm itself. Before we proceed, if you find stories like this meaningful, a quick like and subscribe really helps this channel grow. Survival wasn't the end of the story. At the rescue base, warmth returned slowly to Daniel's body. Doctors treated the other climber for severe exposure, but he stabilized. Later that evening, a member of the rescue team approached Daniel. "You know who you pulled off that ridge?" he asked. Daniel shook his head. "A local mountain guide. Experienced. He was part of a small survey crew. The avalanche separated them. We'd been searching since yesterday." Daniel sat quietly. The ski pole, the missing tracks. It all made sense now. "If you hadn't stopped," the rescuer continued, leaving the sentence unfinished. Daniel stared at his hands. He had gone up that mountain to test himself, to prove something personal. Strength, endurance, independence. Instead, the mountain tested something else. Choice. Skill had kept him alive through the storm. But compassion had saved 2 lives. As night settled outside the base windows, Daniel realized something profound. Survival isn't just about lasting longer than the storm. It's about what you decide when fear tells you to think only of yourself. Ridge 47 had taken his certainty. It had taken his sense of control. But it had given him something stronger. And he knew one thing for sure. The next time he stood on a mountain, he wouldn't just be climbing for himself. Because sometimes the greatest test of survival isn't staying alive. It's choosing who you refuse to leave behind.